Now we'll be turning to the distinction between total costs, fixed costs, and variable costs. And we're going to start looking at the equations that relate these different kinds of costs. So we've already talked about total costs, right? Total cost is the total amount that the firm has to expend or give up in order to produce their chosen good, right? Whatever that might be. And that total cost is going to be broken down into two parts. So it's going to be the sum of the firm's fixed costs and the firm's variable costs. We've already talked about fixed costs, and these for the firm are their sunk costs. So keep that in mind, right? Fixed costs are sunk. And importantly, they're sunk because they're not going to vary with output. So the firm has to take on these costs before they even start producing. So an example of this is going to be rented office space, right? If a firm, maybe they're a research and development firm, if they want to start producing that research before they can start, right, day one, they have to have a space in which to operate. And so that's going to be part of their fixed costs. Variable costs, in contrast, are going to change with output. So if nothing is being produced, then there are no variable costs. So example of this could be the electricity that is used to turn on the AC, to power the lights in the building, right? To power the machinery. Labor is often going to be a variable cost, right? If, for example, a coffee shop is closed for a day, it's not taking on the cost of those workers, but it's still having to pay for that space that it occupies. So the variable cost of workers is zero, but the fixed cost is still there because they're still paying and likely have already paid for the rent of that space. We can see these different costs graphically here, where fixed cost is constant, right? Because that's representing essentially the cost of capital, right? In the short run, it's going to remain the same regardless of how much is produced. Total cost is our blue line here. It's the curvier line that's above the orange one. And you're going to see that it's following the shape of variable costs exactly, except it's higher by the amount of the fixed costs, right? So it starts at 50 and grows with the variable costs. This slide just explains exactly what I went through on the previous slide, looking at the shape of those curves, right? Fixed cost curve is exactly horizontal because it does not change at all with output, whereas the variable cost increases with output, and it's not constant. We might see in some cases economies of scale, but it's always going to be growing, right? And the total cost then is going to have the slope of the variable cost with just the amount of fixed costs above that variable cost curve. So what are some factors that influence whether costs are fixed? Our first factor here is going to be time horizon. So remember that that short run versus long run distinction is really important, right? In the short run, capital cannot change. And so those are going to be our fixed costs. So in a single day, for instance, the cost of most restaurants are fixed, right? They've hired who they've hired, they've purchased the ingredients already, people are there ready to work. And so those are all going to be fixed costs for that restaurant. Whereas in the long run, even which can even be the next day, that is going to be more variable, right? Do they want to change or modify their order for ingredients that are going to be delivered in the morning? Do they want to change who's going to come in to work that shift, right? New capital can be purchased, new staff can be brought on or let go, right? All of that can adjust. And so we're going to see in the long run an absence of fixed costs, right? Fixed costs don't exist in the long run. All costs are variable. Institutionally, if we have robust capital rental or resale markets, that's going to bring more flexibility to the capital expenditures. So where it's really easy to resell machinery, the time horizon of what we consider the short run when those costs are fixed becomes smaller and smaller. On the labor side of things, contracts are going to add to labor being a more fixed cost. It's going to lead to what's often called stickiness in labor inputs. So it just means it's more difficult to let a worker go if they're on a 3-week contract, right? You have to keep them on for those 3 weeks. And so in essence, the pay to that worker is fixed, it's sunk. For firms that hire day to day, hour to hour, those labor contracts are much more flexible. And so the labor costs are going to be much more variable as a result. And variable in this instance, meaning that they vary with output. So let's think about how we represent some of these costs. So we've looked at the graphs. Now we can look at representing these costs in a table. So in the first column here, we have quantity of output going from 0 to 12. In the second column, we see fixed costs are constant at $50. Variable costs increase with output, right? So as output grows, so does variable costs. And then total cost, if you were to do this math, is just fixed cost plus variable cost. So when we have no variable costs, because nothing is being produced, fixed cost equal, or excuse me, total cost equal fixed costs, right? When we start producing and we have 1 unit of output, we have positive variable costs of 10. We add that to our constant fixed costs of 50, and our total costs are $60. Right? If we increase output to 2 units, now variable costs have gone up to 17.5. We add those to our fixed costs of $50, and we get a total cost of 67.5, and so on. So you could do that calculation for each of our rows here, right, for each level of output. And this is just a pop-up here to prompt you to notice that the shape of these curves is reflected here in the table, right? Fixed cost is constant at 50, variable cost increases positively with output, and total cost likewise has that same slope of variable cost, that is just 50 units higher, $50 higher than variable costs. With that, we'll stop this video, and the next video will turn to average and marginal cost.